My name is Dave Schroeder. I'm the Executive Director of the Kenton County Library. Before that, I was the local history librarian. So I spent most of my career in the history and genealogy department, actually, where Sierra works now. So I'm very grateful that the department is in good hands, and Elaine and Sierra and everyone there is doing a wonderful job and are always willing and able to help. But I wanted to talk a little bit today about a program that I have found extremely helpful in my research. And since we live in a very German area of the country with a lot of Catholics as well who are German, I think this database will be very helpful to many in the area. I found out about it a couple years ago at a Roots Tech conference where somebody just mentioned Matricula and then went on and was talking about something else. And so I just made a little notation and decided that it would probably be a good idea to see what this Matricula is all about. And boy, was I impressed. There's so much here that I had no clue even existed. I think part of it is because it's being done by a group in Europe. So it doesn't have a connection to Ancestry or to Find My Past or to Roots Web or it's not a commercial product. It's a group of individuals and organizations in German-speaking Europe who are scanning church records, and in this case, Catholic church records, and making them available for free on the internet, which is one of the great things about this product. Anybody can use it anytime you want. And it's free. There is a counterpart that's also happening with Protestant church records in Germany, and it's called Archion, Archion. It is similar, but it is a fee-based service. So you have to pay a fee to use Archion. Matricula, the Catholic church records are free. So it's a really great resource, and we're going to go through it. And I'm going to give you some examples of my own family to show you how it works and why it's so important. One of the things that we need to remember is a little bit about German history in general. This is Germany during the era of Bismarck. So this would be the late 1800s. So you'll see there are lots of different kingdoms and duchies and provinces. There is not necessarily a united Germany until 1871. So before 1871, people who said they were German meant they shared a German culture, they shared the German language, but there was no Germany on the map until 1871, when Germany was united. The dominant power was Prussia, which on this map is that pink area, not Russia, but Prussia with a P. But then you'll see there's lots of other places. If you look across the green areas, for instance, there's the Kingdom of Hanover, and there's the Grand Duchy of Oldenburg. Those are two areas you're going to hear a lot about tonight, because a lot of German Catholics who settled in the greater Cincinnati area came from those two places. So if you look on this map, you'll see Oldenburg is orange there, and surrounded by it is green, which is the Kingdom of Hanover. So Hanover was a kingdom. Oldenburg was a grand duchy. They were separate government entities and eventually became part of the United Germany in 1871. But it's very important to note that, and I think a lot of people are surprised, that Germany as a unified state really did not exist till 1871. So what can you find in German church records in general? German church records were the primary, churches were the primary record keepers for hundreds of years in most of Europe, especially in Germany. They existed before civil records. So in most cases, they are the oldest records as well, especially for common people. So the peasants, everyday people, middle-class folks. Church records are in many ways the primary record in Europe. You often will find records of baptisms, marriages, deaths, and then sometimes confirmations, first communions, church census books. But typically, you will always find baptisms, marriages, and deaths. Those are the three major record groups that churches in Germany kept, whether they were Protestant or Catholic. And so those three are, of course, very valuable to us as genealogists because they give us a date of birth, they give us a date of marriage, and they give us the date of death. They also give us places in many cases. So these records are extremely important. And I think it's not surprising, but well, maybe it is a little surprising in that when you come to the United States and you start looking at records, in Kentucky, for instance, we did not keep birth and death records in Kentucky on a consistent basis until 1911. Ohio is about 1909, if I have that correct. Before that, church records were the primary records in this country as well, in many ways. And so churches, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, the Jewish faith also kept significant records. So religious denominations play a key role in our genealogical research because in most cases, they are the record keepers prior to 1900. So, and when you think of Germany today, so Germany is in the middle there, surrounded primarily by red. The eastern part of that red and is no longer part of Germany. But you'll see that the German people or German-speaking people live in many countries. So you'll find German-speaking people in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Switzerland. Austria is completely German-speaking, even some in northern Italy, the Czech Republic, some in Hungary, and Poland, even into Lithuania. And don't forget Russia. There are Germans who went to Russia and colonized parts of Russia. And so German-speaking peoples aren't just from what we consider today Germany. They're from all over. And Matricula is collecting not necessarily just records from Germany, but from German-speaking lands. So you will find lots of Austrian records, for instance, in Matricula. They're gathering those records wherever Germans lived. And so when I show you the site, you'll see that they're pulling records from German-speaking areas, not necessarily just from what today we see on the map as Germany. So this is a little bit broader than just Germany. It's German-speaking areas. This is not a comprehensive database, so they haven't collected every record from every Catholic church in these areas, and that will probably never happen. But it's pretty comprehensive. There are many areas that have been covered, and you can search online on Matricula and see which areas are covered. The interesting thing is that area where many of us are from, in that northwest Germany area by the Dutch border. Right in this area here, many of these records have been scanned and are on Matricula. If your family came from Oldenburg, Hanover area, it's very likely you'll find records on Matricula. So I'm going to use one of my families, one of my descendants as an example. This is the Meyer family, M-E-Y-E-R, who married into the Schroeder family. So this is like a Smith and a Jones getting married. Meyer is an extremely common name in Germany, and Schroeder is an extremely common name in Germany. And so I have these two very common names, and they married into one another. So these have been very challenging for me. This is on my dad's side of the family, of course. On my mom's side of the family, they have very specific German speaking or sounding names. And so they have been a little bit easier to track down. Schroeder and Meyer have not necessarily been so. But I was hitting brick wall after brick wall until I found Matricula, and then it opened up some doors for me. And I'm going to show you the rest of this evening how those doors were open and what it told me. But here's where we're going to start, the 1860 census of Cincinnati, Ohio. So Caroline Meyer is my great grandmother. She is the child, the youngest child living in the Meyer household in Cincinnati in 1860. So her father is Clemens. So here's Clemens. Here's the oldest son, Joseph. He's 12, so he would probably have been born in about 1848, 1849. Bernard was probably born around 1850. And Caroline was, I know she was born in 1855, but here you would say 1855, 1856, depending on when the census was taken. There is also an older woman living in the household. Her last name is Meyer, and her name is Margaret. This is shortened for Margaret. She's 67 years old. I'm assuming she is probably Clemens' mother, but I have not been able to prove that. So I'm looking into that. But you get the basic stuff here on an 1860 census. You get the ages, male, female. Clemens is a laborer. He has personal value of $200. One thing that this tells you that's very important is where he's from. So he's from Hanover, as are all his children and this older woman living with them. Again, I believe this is probably his mother, just age here, and she's living with them. They're all born in Hanover. Now, Hanover you will see spelled with a double N and a single N. They're interchangeable in some ways. And you have to remember that in this case, Hanover doesn't mean the city. It means the kingdom of Hanover. Rarely do you see on a census the city they came from. So this narrows it down, but it doesn't tell you exactly where they came from. It tells you where in Germany, the general area in Germany they came from, but not the exact place. So we get a start. We know Caroline. I know this to be the right Caroline because of her birth date and because of her father's name in her obituary and in her death certificate. And I know these to be her brothers. And so I'm confident that this is the right family. They are living in over the Rhine at this point in 1860. By the mid 1880s, they moved to Northern Kentucky. But at this point, like many German families who came to Cincinnati, they come through Cincinnati first. And like many of them, my family, this part of my family came through over the Rhine. So to try to figure out who these Meyers were and where they came from, I started looking for immigration lists. Most of these you can find on Ancestry.com. When I began doing genealogy, there was no Ancestry.com, so I was looking at them on microfilm. But there's a pretty comprehensive collection on Ancestry. I did find them in landing in the port of Baltimore on a ship called the Ernestine in November of 1859. I know they're the right family and that all the names and ages match. Now, the interesting thing is here, the name is spelled on the immigration list as M-E-I-E-R. In all the records in the United States, they're spelled M-E-Y-E-R. And so with common names like this, you can't just rely on, well, they're always spelled Meyer, so this isn't the right family. It is the right family. They're listed as being natives of Hanover, and their destination is listed as Cincinnati. And as I said, everybody matches up. 3 children, mother, father, all the dates match. So pretty confident this is it. I think another thing that's important about passenger ship lists, we hear this all the time that people change their names at Ellis Island, or that the Ellis Island officials changed people's names. That did not happen. People could maybe change their name on their own, but no one in Ellis Island changed their names. how this process worked was, in this case in particular, and in many Germans from northern Germany, they either left Bremerhaven or Hamburg. This family left Bremerhaven. When they arrived, the Ernestine, the officials on the Ernestine were required to keep the immigration records, not people in Germany. The ship passenger lists are kept by the shipping company. And so whoever was keeping the records was spelling the name. So when my great-great-grandfather Clemens and his wife and children came to get on the Ernestine, they were asked what their name was. The person who recorded it as Meier. I can tell you they were peasant farmers. They probably, I'm sure they could probably spell their last name, but they probably weren't extremely literate. And so they were just trying to get on the ship to come here. They weren't making corrections to this. And they probably never saw the record. The records were kept on very large registries, and they went on the ship. So those registries, after they were filled out, went on the ship. And when the person got to the port, in this case, Baltimore, they were ticked off. So somebody went down the list, and when you left, they found your name on the list, and they put a check mark next to it saying that you arrived or you got off the boat. You'll see that a lot on these lists. And so this whole idea of when you got to the United States, they changed your name isn't true. And a good example of this is, interestingly enough, is the Titanic. We don't know exactly who was on that Titanic for one reason and one reason only. The North Star Line kept the records because they got on a North Star Line ship, the Titanic. Those records were on the Titanic when it sunk because they were taken with the passengers on the ship to what would have been the departure in the United States. Well, we know the Titanic sank. The records went down with it because those records didn't stay in England or in Ireland. They went with the ship. Same thing happened with our immigrants' records. So I'm getting off the track here, but I just want to make that kind of clear in that this myth of changing names at Ellis Island or wherever you came is a myth. Many people who came to Cincinnati, especially Germans during this time period, came through Baltimore. We always think immigrants come through New York. Well, many of them didn't. I have relatives who came through Baltimore. I have only one that came through New York. I have many who came through New Orleans. And so check all of those lists. Here's the actual list. So, and it was on 2 pages, so that's why it's split here in 2. So we've got Clemens Meyer. He's 39 years old. He's male. He's listed as a farmer. Above this says Hanover, so he's from Hanover. And above this says he's arriving, or he's going, his destination is Cincinnati. You'll see that lower here when they record the children. So here's my great-great-grandfather. He was 39 years old when he came over with his wife, Mary Ann, who was 45 years old, and their 3 children. This being my great-grandmother, Caroline. She's 4 years old. Now, there's something very interesting on this record that I have never found with my own research on my own family, and it solved a mystery for me. Because if you remember when I showed you the 1860 census, there was someone missing. I told you Clemens was on that census, his 3 children, and the person I thought was his mother-in-law. And it probably is his mother-in-law. The wife was not listed. When I found this record of the Ernestine, look what it says on the margin for Mary Ann, the wife. Died 19th of October. She died on the way over. So she left Germany to come to the United States as an immigrant with her husband and her 3 small children. She died on the way on the 19th of October. She would have been buried at sea. In 1859, there was no ice on board ships. There was nowhere to put a dead body. Dead bodies were not something that they would have kept on a ship for disease and other purposes. And so there would have been a very short burial performed at sea, and she would have been buried at sea. So this is my great-great-grandmother. And when I list her date of death, I know it is 19th October, 1859. The place, when I record it in my online genealogy, I put Atlantic Ocean because I don't know exactly where she died. I just know she died on the way over. So it's kind of a nice, it's an interesting piece of family history. Now, my grandfather, this would have been my grandfather's grandmother, never talked about this. I don't even think he knew. You know, a lot of these stories that are so interesting have never been passed down. And so I think as genealogists, we're retelling the stories that never got told to begin with. And, you know, you would think that this would have been a pretty traumatic event. I mean, the oldest son was 8 years old. I mean, he would have remembered this. My great grandmother was only 4. She may or may not have remembered it, but certainly you would think that she would have. At least she knew the story that her mother died. So interesting piece of history. And a lot of times we forget to look at the full record. If you had only looked at this record and didn't look at this little notation over here, you would have not known this. This solved that mystery for me. Clemens lived until his 80s. So he lived another 40 something years. He did not remarry. He raised all of his children. He eventually moved to Covington to live with my great grandmother before he died. And so he lived a long life and took care of his family. And this is another part of the story that I love telling my nieces and nephews because, you know, here's this 39-year-old man who's arriving. He's leaving home with his wife. He speaks no English. He arrives in the United States with 3 children under the age of 10 in the city of Baltimore. He had lost his wife about a month before on the journey over. And he's starting over in a new world where he doesn't speak the language and he's lost his wife and he's got 3 children to take care of. Pretty interesting, compelling story. And I'm going to find out more about, I'm trying to find more about his life. He's buried in Cincinnati. So what do you need to know to start using Matricula? And I hate to tell you all this, but you still need to know the village. You can't, Hanover is not good enough. You need to know the village in Hanover. Matricula is not indexed yet. I have a feeling that there's a movement to do that. And you can imagine there's millions of records, so it's going to take a long time. But there are ways of finding that city or village. So we still have to do that work. And someday we're going to be able to sit down in front of a computer and be able to look at an index and find that village. But right now we can't. So we got to start finding ways to look for that information. So I went to Carrie Meyer, who by the time she died was Carrie Schroeder. I found her death certificate in 1920. It says she was born July 18th, 1855. Perfect match with the immigration record and perfect match with the census record. Her father is listed as Clemens or Clem Meyer of Germany. She's listed as being born in Germany. Her mother is listed as Christina Renza, R-E-N-Z-A. I knew that was probably wrong. Her son, Harry, who is my great uncle, filled out the information. He did not know this woman. She had died long before he was born. And he said her name was Christina Renza. I'll tell you, we'll see what her real name was. This really doesn't give us any more information except a possible clue on the mother's name. So how do you find that place of birth then? Ancestry is a good place. They have online family trees. The only thing I will tell you is use those databases like Ancestry, Find My Past, Heritage Quest, all of those online resources. We have most of them available at the library. Some you have to be in the building to use, some you can use from home with your library card. Many people have downloaded trees. So start looking and see if your ancestor is listed in one of those trees and they give a source. But always double check. A lot of times those online trees are wrong because people put them in and none of us are perfect and we make mistakes. On my mother's side of the family, my great-grandmother is listed in a genealogy online as being buried with her husband. Her husband's information is all correct. She is listed as a completely different person. My mother knew her grandmother. We know everything about her well, not everything. We know all the specific dates, etc., about my great-grandmother. This genealogist has put her online, but she's misidentified her. She's found records for a woman with the same name, but it's not the same person. I have tried to correct it online and I have emailed this person multiple times, and they will not take it down and they are insistent they are correct. I have photographs of this woman. I know who she is. My mother knew her very well. We know who this woman is, but this online genealogy, the genealogy of her is completely wrong, and meaning that everything that this person has done back from her is completely wrong, because they're following the wrong person. So when you're using online trees, verify, verify, verify. That didn't help me because nobody had downloaded this family online on any of these trees. So I started looking in city directories to see what neighborhood they lived in. I found a marriage record from Holy Trinity Church in Cincinnati, which no longer exists, through the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. But it did not list birthplaces beyond Hanover. So it listed Henry Schroeder, Carrie Meyer, married in 1877, both from Hanover, but that was it. So again, struck out. So then I thought, well, let's look at the baptismal records, perhaps, of their children. So I looked at Carrie. She was my grandmother, Caroline Meyer. And I thought, well, let's look at her children's records and see what they say. So they weren't at Holy Trinity. I asked the archivist of the Archdiocese to look there. They were not at Holy Trinity. So I started looking in city directories and we found them living very close to St. Paul Church and over the Rhine. St. Paul is the Verdun Bell Company. If you're going on 71 north and you look to the left, you'll see a red brick church with a gold little dome on it. That's St. Paul. So we found them there. Oh, sorry, I already talked about that. Here's one of the records that I got back. Now, this was a record of Henry and Mary Caroline Meyer. So this is my great-grandmother and her husband, Henry. This is the baptism of one of their children. 12 February, 1880. Henry was from Cincinnati, which I later have verified. He was born in Cincinnati. Maria Carolina. Again, Caroline was her name that she always went by, but many Catholics use Mary quite frequently. So Mary Carolina is Caroline. She was born on February 12th, 1880, and she was baptized on February 12th, 1880 at St. Paul in Cincinnati. Now, the interesting thing here is it says Henry Schroeder is from Cincinnati. This is Maria, who in the census of 1860 and in the immigration record was the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old. She is born, she's from, and the archivist wrote this in because she couldn't get a good copy. She's from Langerich. So then I thought, well, okay, let's see if we can find another child. So I find another child, Joseph. Again, right father, right mother. Look where she's from, Langerich. Okay, so I know where she's from. So I found this information very early on. I've had this information for 20 years. I was writing to the archivist several archivists in Germany, trying to find the records in Germany without any luck. I had very little luck. I had no luck. Either people didn't answer me, or they said they looked and they couldn't find them, or the name was too common. Got all kinds of answers, but I had no access physically to the records, so I couldn't do the research. And the researchers were not helping me in this regard. They couldn't find it. But I did have the place of birth. So I knew Caroline was from a city in Germany called Langerich. So if you go to the map, it's this red dot. This is the city of Osnabrück. Here's Munster. Here is Bremen. The Bremerhaven would be right up here. So when they left to immigrate, they would have gone up here to Bremerhaven and would have left from there. Munster, and then Cologne is down here at the bottom. And so here's the Netherlands. So they're right up against the Dutch border. Here's Hanover. So this area is where a lot of German Catholic families in the greater Cincinnati area came from. This is the city's town seal. And so I knew where the city was, but no one there. I could either get no answers from the people working there, or they couldn't find anything. Well, I found Matricula. All of these little hearts are records of my family I found on Matricula. Look how closely grouped they are. And I can tell you, looking through all of these church records on Matricula, that it's like looking through a Northern Kentucky phone book in many of these parish records. There are so many family names that are consistent in Northern Kentucky and in Cincinnati that are in these records. These are both sides of my family, by the way. So, and I have found my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family living less than 5 miles away from each other at different times in this part of Germany. So both sides of my family came from this area, and the records in Matricula are almost complete for this area, which was great. So once Matricula became available, it gave me options to do the research on my own. I no longer had to work with an archivist across the pond. Language was no longer an issue. I had access to these records. So what I am going to do is, well, let me show you kind of a little bit of how it works. So we got to that point. Let me actually take you to the site. So I am going to share a different screen here. So give me a minute. We're going to go live here. I'm going to take you to the Matricula site, hopefully. Okay, so here we are. This is the Matricula site. It is a free site. Again, you're free to search it. There's no charges. The only thing I suggest is when you're looking for it, it has a little bit of a wonky address. Just Google Matricula Church and it'll pull this up. It looks like a very unassuming page, but there are millions of records here. So all you need to do is click on the little magnifying glass, you can put in a diocese. So here's dioceses from throughout the German-speaking world that have allowed these records to be scanned and put online. Now, if you remember, there was Munster was next to where my relatives were. Osnabrück was next to where my relatives were. If you don't know where, you can just type in the city. There we go. Guess what? There are 5 churches in and around that area that probably have the information I need. So I started looking through them. I'll show you. I started with number 1, then I went to St. Benedict. So I click on. It's telling me that the parish records are from 1648 to 1718, and that these parishes were started or broken off from it. So I know these parishes are not good for me because they're all much later than I need. So I was pretty sure by this point that I had the right church, St. Benedict. The nice thing about it is it gives you a current map, gives you an older map of Langridge. So it shows you the town center and it shows you the farmland around it. My ancestor Meyer would have worked in a farm around this area. It shows you the picture of the church, which is great. When people say, where did the family come from? You can say, here, or you can show them the map. If you scroll down, it's going to give you the record books. So you don't really need to know German here. You just need to know a few phrases. Taufen means basically baptism. So you'll see lots of Taufens here. Those are all individual record books. This Taufen Reformert is actually the German Reformed Church. My descendants, I believe to be Catholic, and so I'm sticking with the regular church records that don't have Reformed next to them. There's very few churches in this index that have Reformed churches in them. They're mostly all Catholic records. This one, for some reason, this parish went back and forth in keeping records for Protestants and Catholics, which is kind of interesting. This word, so heiraten, means to marry. So these are marriage records. So again, these would be the Catholic ones. These are German Reformed. And again, you're not going to find many of these kind of records in Matricula. You're going to find the Catholic records. This is an unusual situation here. And then Beerdigungen, my German's not good. I'm better with Latin. But if you Google this word, it means burial. So there are your 3 record groups. We've got baptisms, marriages, and deaths. So here's what I did. I knew my direct ancestor, Caroline Meyer, was born around 1855. And we knew that she was the daughter, of Clemens Meyer and what we believe was Christina Renza. But we did have a date. So what you do, you find the right book. So we're looking for something around 1855. So if you scroll down here, you look for the book that has 1855 in it. So here's 1853 through May of 1857. So this gives you some register details. This little camera takes you directly to the records. It allows you to translate into English if you want to. I'm just going to do not now for the moment. So I know from other records that she was born in 1855. So I'm going to go down to 1855. So look, here are the pages that cover, the sections that cover baptisms. Taufen is baptism for 1855. So I am going to just click one in the middle because I know she was born in July. So let's see what date we're at here. Oh, come on. So here's a July. And actually, I got to the exact right page on the first try. So here she is. Meyer, Maria, Carolina. Her father's name is Johann Clemens Meyer of Handrup. And she is born in Handrup. If we go to a map and type in the word Handrup, it's a little tiny village outside of Langridge. Handrup was not big enough to have its own church, so the people who lived in Handrup went to the church in Langridge. So her birthplace is more than likely Handrup. Her baptismal location is Langridge, St. Benedict in Langridge. So if you look at this a little bit closer, it tells you the father's name and that he's from Handrup. It also tells you the mother's name. Now look at the mother's name, Maria Anna Rensen, not Renza, Rensen. So we now know what her mother's real name was. And we know Clemens' first name, at least in religion, was Johann. He always goes by Clemens in records. But if you look at this too, we also know the correct spelling they were using in Germany was M-E-Y-E-R. And in the United States, they are always M-E-Y-E-R, except on that passenger ship list. So again, you got to be careful about what you're looking at. So we've got a clue here now. We know exactly where she's born. We know we're in the right church. We know her parents' names. So the next thing to do is were Johann Clemens and Maria Anna Rensen married in this church? Many of these families stayed in the same vicinity for generations. So my guess was that they probably did. So what I did was I went to marriages. Okay, so here we are. And we knew the oldest child was born approximately around 1849, 1850. And so typically you would go back a year or maybe 2 years before to find a marriage record going off the oldest child's birth date, if that makes sense. I hope it does. So if the oldest child was born in 1849 or 1850, my assumption was if they were married in this parish, they were probably married sometime about 20 years before the first child, which would make them around 20 years old. So I started in the 1840s, and I started with this book just to be sure. I got to this book, which is 1843 through 1852. And after looking through each one line by line, because remember, many of these are not indexed. Now, occasionally you will find an index in one of these books and they'll be marked as an index. If you find that, that's gold. But if you have to go through the names, you can do it. So I'm just going to take you to what I found. So here's 1847, here's 1848. January 25th, the second marriage of the year of 1848. Here's 1848. We have the marriage of a Meyer, Johann Clemens, to a Maria Anna Rensen of Handrup. So same village where they went on their children's baptismal record. So we knew when they got married, they were both from this little village. They got married at St. Benedict in Langridge. Now, the other thing this gives us in, and Catholic records are really good about this, is they typically will give you parents' names on marriage records. So if we go to this next column, you will see, now I'm going to make it bigger here. Johann Clemens, son of Joseph Meyer, or Joseph Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R, that's an umlaut, and Margaret or Margaretha. This is a can't think of the word. It's a shortening of a name. It's Adelaide, A-L-E-I-D. The rest of it would be Adelaide. I found this name in this family multiple times. So this is a family name that went passed on by generations. Now, her maiden name is listed, which is great. Catholic churches are very good about using women's, not their marriage name, their name given to them at birth. So their birth name. So Margaret Adelaide. Okay, here's the name that we got to do some translation on. Now, any of you all who went to last week's Deciphering German script, this would be very helpful today. O-B-B-E is pretty clear. So there's an O, a B-B, and an E. What is this? So I'm like, it could be a V, it could be an F or a T. So then I start looking at some other things. I looked at the sponsor's name, William Ostendorf, Anna Christina Kramer, R-A-M-E-R. So I'm looking at this letter, which I believe to be a K because it makes sense, Kramer. So I'm looking at that. And then I'm over here and I'm looking at this. I believe the mother's maiden name is K-O-B-B-E. The other thing is, so that is John Clemens' parents. So we got his father, we got his mother. We've got Mary Anna Renson. Her father is Gerhard Bernard Renson, and Maria Adelaide again Peters, P-E-T-E-R-S. They're of Handrup as well. So all of these people are living in this small little village outside of Langridge. They're going to Langridge to St. Benedict's for the sacraments for church. Never underestimate these folks here. These are the sponsors. Oftentimes they're relatives. I have seen Ostendorf name in family records. I have not been able to connect them in, but I'm almost sure this is a relative. So again, not only did I get their marriage certificate, I got their parents' names. So I got back another generation. So I've gone from Caroline to her father and mother, Clemens and Mary Anna Renson, to her grandparents, Joseph Meyer and Margareta Adelaide Kobe, and Gerhard Bernard Renson and Maria Adelaide Peters. So I've got 3 generations here. So I start looking back further into seeing if any of these parents, these folks here, were baptized in this parish. I cannot find them in this parish. So I've gone back about 25 years and started back and going systematically one parish or one record by one record in the baptisms. I have not found them. So then I thought, okay, if they weren't baptized in this parish, then maybe one of them died in this parish. So then I started looking at burials. So here's burials. And this is hit or miss because people, like Clemens' wife who died on the ship, she was in her 40s when she died. Some of these people living well into their 80s. So this was a lot of digging and a lot of going through records line by line. But I thought I had a pretty good shot of finding some of these grandparents, some of Clemens or Mary Anna's parents dying in this parish. So I started looking in the burial records. I do find, let's see. So after systematically, and of course I went one page too far, systematically going through these burial records. Oops. So again, line by line, very tedious, but it worked because in September of 1858, let's see if this is it. Let's see what date I'm on. Okay. Back page. So I'm in October, November. Here's the dates over here. So here's September. Let's see. Let me see if I can find her. Ah, who do I find? Maria Adelaide Renson, originally of Handrup. She was born in Handrup. She's 73 yar, 73 years of age. And German records are pretty good too about parents. Not only did it give me her date of death, but in Germany and oftentimes in the parish records, they give you the parents' names. So even though she died at 73 years old, it gave me her father's name, Gerhard Casper Peters. Remember, her maiden name was Peters before she married Renson. And her mother's name is Gesina, Gesina, Brumer, B-R-U with an umlaut, M-M-E-R. So I got back another generation just by finding this one burial record. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to go back to my original here. Okay, let me get to that one page, and I'll show you what I found and how long it took me to get there. So we've seen all of this. Again, this is research I've done in the same manner. Find the right village, start looking for the parish, and then start hammering away at dates and going back. When you find the oldest child, go back 20 years for a marriage and then keep going back. I have found that to be fairly effective. So there's the parish we found them in. There is the example of the records. This is one example. This is that my great-grandmother, the Maria Meyer, Carolina. So Carolina Meyer. This was her baptismal record I showed you at the beginning, cleaned up a little bit. I did a little bit of work on it to make it a little bit more legible. On here, you can clearly see Renson, for instance. So I just cleaned it up a little using the computer. There's the parish church. This was the marriage record between Johann Clemens and Maria Anna Renson. But this is what I ended up with. So here is Caroline Meyer, born in 1855, died in 1921. Here is Johann Heinrich Schroeder, name spelled differently before World War I and after. So my name before World War I is almost consistently spelled Schroeder with an umlaut, or the two dots over the O. During World War I, to be less German, they dropped the umlaut and added an E. So all of my family records, primarily before World War I, are spelled this way. After World War I, they're spelled the way I spell it today, Schroeder. He's born in Cincinnati. He dies in Covington. She dies in Covington. This is her parents. Remember, we found their marriage to John Clemens Meyer and Maria Anna Rensen, 1848 in Langridge, Hanover. Oh. Then we found her parents. So Gerhard Bernard Rensen married Maria Adelaide Peters. She's born in 1785, according to her death record, because she died in 1858 and she was 73. So she probably died in 1785 or 1784. And we know where. And that record gave us her parents' names, Gerhard Casper Peters and Jacina Brumer. So this took me 4 hours of work. So I got one church, 4 generations in 4 hours. I haven't had as much luck with some of my other family lines, I'll be honest with you. This one was an interesting one because of the burial at sea and because of the different spellings of names and the common names. So it's hopefully giving you some ideas that you can use these resources and have luck. You can find the records. So I am now going to try to get myself back on this screen, and I will start taking some questions.